He came back from the border with his body intact, but the shadows in his eyes whispered of a war that never ended. When Raghav stepped off the plane, the warm air of New Delhi felt like a slap after the dry, biting winds of the border. His boots were worn, his uniform neatly folded in his duffel, and his eyes, once full of fire, held a distant, clouded storm. He hadn't been home in almost 2 years. The war zone on the northern frontier had a way of consuming time and memories. His wife, Asha, stood at the arrival gate with their 6-year-old son Ariv gripping her hand tightly. The child didn't rush forward, not like in the movies. He stared at the man in camouflage who looked like his father, but whose posture screamed unfamiliarity. Asha smiled, tears forming, but she noticed it too. The subtle limp, the way Raghav scanned the area as if expecting an ambush, and the forced smile he returned. They embraced stiffly. Raghav patted Ariv's head but didn't pick him up. The car ride home was quiet. Asha tried to fill the silence with stories. About Ariv's school, the garden she started, how the neighbor's dog kept sneaking into their house. Raghav nodded politely, but his mind wasn't in the car. It wasn't even in Delhi. It was somewhere between the cold stone outposts and the silent stares of the men who didn't make it back. That night, Asha woke up to Raghav gasping. He sat upright in bed, drenched in sweat, his hand reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. "Raghav?" she whispered. Touching his shoulder, he flinched and turned sharply. For a second, she didn't recognize the look in his eyes. "Just a dream," he muttered, getting out of bed. "I need water." He didn't come back to bed that night. A week later, the signs became clearer. Raghav avoided crowds. He'd disappear into the backyard for hours, sitting under the old mango tree, staring into nothing. He jumped at loud noises. Ariv's toy helicopter crashing to the floor caused him to drop to the ground and cover his head instinctively. Asha approached him gently one evening. "You haven't talked about anything, about what happened out there." He stared ahead. "Nothing to talk about. I'm home now." "But you're not here, Raghav." He stood up. "Don't start this." "I'm not starting anything. You're not the man who left. You don't even hug your son." He turned slowly. "Because every time I close my eyes, I see men with their limbs blown off. Boys begging for their mothers in the snow. I hear bombs, Asha. And in the silence, I hear nothing. Nothing is worse than silence." She stepped forward, her voice breaking. "Then let me be the one who hears it with you. You don't have to carry this alone." But Raghav was already walking away. Neighbors came to visit, old friends dropped by, but Raghav kept his interactions short. He smiled like a robot and left early. He refused to meet his commanding officer for a debriefing, ignoring calls from the unit's counselor. He said nothing was wrong, but his nights were getting darker, and the bags under his eyes heavier. One evening, as Ariv drew pictures in the living room, he showed one to his father. "This is you, Papa, and this is me. We're playing cricket." Raghav took the drawing and studied it. 2 stick figures, a sun in the corner, cricket bat, a ball. And in the background, tanks, helicopters, a flame. "Why is there fire?" Raghav asked. Ariv shrugged. "I thought that's what it's like where you were." Raghav handed the paper back, his hands trembling. He went outside again. Asha followed but didn't speak. She just stood by him in silence. As the wind picked up and the sky turned dark, Asha started keeping a journal. She didn't know what else to do. Every day she recorded Raghav's moods. His silences, his outbursts, the sleepless nights, the times he stared at nothing for hours. It wasn't for a blog or a therapist, though she hoped someday she might show it to someone who could help. It was just to survive. She remembered how he used to be. Before he left, Raghav was vibrant, joking, laughing, singing with Ariv as he brushed his teeth. He used to tell bedtime stories, tales of heroic warriors and moral battles, always with a lesson tucked in. Now, he didn't speak unless prompted. And even then, his voice was low, monotone. It was like the color had drained from his soul. One night, Asha found Raghav sitting in the dark living room, holding a medal in his hands. The ribbon was frayed, the brass surface scratched. "I didn't earn this," he whispered. She sat beside him. "They gave it to you for bravery." He laughed, dry and bitter. "Bravery? You think I was brave when I ordered Sanjay to hold the left flank? When I knew we were outnumbered?" He was 23, just married. His wife is probably still waiting for a call. Raghav, we carried him in a tarp. We didn't even have a proper body bag. I still see his eyes, like he was asking me, why? She placed a hand over his. War is never fair. You did what you had to. His hand jerked away. Don't justify it. You weren't there. You didn't hear the screams when the shells hit. You didn't smell the blood or watch men freeze because there weren't enough blankets. You didn't see the vultures circling us because they thought we were already dead. He stood and paced the room, gripping his hair. You can't fix me, Asha. I'm broken. Just leave me be. But she didn't move. She waited until his breathing calmed and he sank back into the couch, exhausted. The next morning, Raghav insisted on walking Arav to school. It was sudden, uncharacteristic. Asha, surprised but hopeful, said nothing. They walked in silence. Arav glanced up a few times but said nothing either. At the school gate, Raghav knelt down and hugged him tightly. Too tightly? You okay, Papa? Arav asked, eyes wide. Raghav pulled back. You're a good boy, Arav. Never forget that. And then, without warning, he turned and walked away, past the car, past the main road, and kept going. Asha received a call from the school. Mrs. Sharma, your husband didn't pick up Arav. Everything okay? He was gone for 6 hours. When he finally came home, his clothes were dusty, his lips dry. I needed to walk, he said simply. Asha didn't ask questions, but that night, she sat him down and opened her laptop. On the screen was a web page, Veterans Mental Health Counseling Services for Indian Armed Forces. I'm not crazy, he said sharply. No, you're not, she replied. You're hurt. He looked at her, anger giving way to something softer. And what if talking about it makes it worse? Then we do it together, she said. I'm not going anywhere. A week later, Raghav met with the counselor, an ex-army psychiatrist who had served in Kargil. At first, Raghav sat with arms crossed, skeptical. I don't believe in all this shrink stuff, he said. The counselor nodded. Neither did I, until I realized I hadn't slept in 6 months without dreaming of bullets. Raghav glanced up. For the first time, he felt understood. They talked, slowly, about the night patrols, the ambush, the friends he lost, the guilt, the anger, the emptiness. After the session, he sat in the car, silent. Asha didn't push. He finally said, it's like unclogging a drain. The muck starts flowing first. It stinks. But eventually, the water moves. At home, Raghav stood in front of the mirror. He looked at himself, really looked. The man staring back had aged. His beard a little more salt than pepper. His posture, still rigid but no longer hostile, that he found Ariv's cricket bat leaning near the door. That evening, he called out, Ariv, wanna play? The boy looked up, surprised, then grinned. You sure, Papa? Raghav smiled. Yeah, let's knock down some imaginary wickets. They played until the sun dipped low. Asha watched from the window, heart full, tears flowing freely. The cricket games became routine. Every evening, after dinner, Raghav and Ariv would spend 30 minutes in the small backyard batting, bowling and laughing. Asha would sit with her chai on the porch, watching the slow return of the man she married. But like healing from any deep wound, progress wasn't linear. Some nights were worse than others. Raghav could be smiling during dinner, then vanish upstairs without warning. Once, Asha found him standing under a cold shower, fully dressed, shivering and gripping the wall. I heard something, he muttered. An engine? Like the trucks we rode in? It was so loud. She gently helped him out, wrapped him in towels and held him as he sat on the edge of the bed. His body was here, but his mind was drifting, still dodging bullets on icy slopes, still counting the dead. Asha began learning more about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It wasn't a term many used openly in their circle, and certainly not in India, where soldiers were often expected to be made of steel. But the more she read, the more she saw Raghav in every bullet point. Sleep disturbances, flashbacks, emotional numbness. Hypervigilance. Point. One morning, while reading an article on PTSD recovery, she paused at a line. Your loved one is not dangerous. They are wounded, emotionally, and like any wound, it needs time, care, and sometimes professional intervention. She printed it out and taped it to the fridge. Raghav's counselor introduced him to a support group. Veterans from various backgrounds, men and women who had served across regions and wars. At first, Raghav didn't want to go. "What will talking to strangers do?" he asked. "They're not strangers," the counselor replied. "They're mirrors." Raghav sat through the first meeting with folded arms, saying nothing. But then an older soldier, Major Singh, shared his story. He had fought in Siachen, lost 3 toes to frostbite, and a best friend to a landmine. He spoke about how he couldn't walk past construction sites without breaking down because the sound of a jackhammer reminded him of mortar shells. "I used to think I was losing my mind," Singh said, "until I realized my brain was just trying to survive in the only way it knew how." The words hit Raghav like a wave. When his turn came, he hesitated. But then, slowly, he spoke. Just a little. Just enough. By the third meeting, he was opening up more. One night he came home and told Asha, "I met a guy who still wakes up screaming if a door slams. He hasn't seen his family in 6 years. Said he's afraid he'll scare his kids." Asha placed a hand over his. "You're doing better than you think." But recovery wasn't a straight climb. During Diwali, as firecrackers exploded across the neighborhood, Raghav collapsed in the hallway, covering his head. Ariv, terrified, screamed for Asha. Took 15 minutes to calm him down, and even then, he locked himself in the bathroom for 2 hours. The next day, Raghav apologized to Ariv, sat him down and said, "Papa is trying to be brave, but sometimes my brain hears bad sounds and thinks I'm still in danger." Ariv, wise beyond his years, nodded solemnly. "Like when I hear thunder and think it's a monster?" Raghav smiled. "Exactly like that." They hugged for a long time. News from the border still haunted him. Every time there was a clash or a martyrdom announced, his hands would tremble. He stopped watching the news, stopped checking WhatsApp groups full of old army friends. It was too much. But one night, he received a call from Ankit, his second-in-command from the unit. "Bye," Ankit said, his voice thick. "We lost Rohit. Sniper fire. Clean shot." Raghav didn't speak. He just let the silence stretch. Ankit continued, "You were his mentor. I thought you should know." After the call, Raghav quietly left the room and didn't return until sunrise. When Asha found him in the backyard, sitting under the mango tree again, she brought him tea and simply sat beside him. "She was pregnant," he said softly. "His wife. He was going to be a father." He took a deep breath, then added, "I've got to do something more. For them. For the ones who didn't come back." The idea came slowly but took root quickly. Raghav decided to start a support foundation for returning soldiers, a place where they could get mental health support, job training, and a community of people who understood. He named it Operation Homefront. Asha offered to help with the website. Ariv made a logo with crayons, 2 hands holding a house, surrounded by stars. "It's not just about me anymore," Raghav said. "We need to make sure others don't come home lost." The foundation, Operation Homefront, grew quickly. Word spread among military veterans, their families, and even local organizations. Raghav poured his heart into it. Every day after work, he would meet with counselors, business leaders, and military officials to create a network of support. Asha was his rock throughout the process, managing logistics, coordinating meetings, and even handling the website for the nonprofit. Slowly, the emotional fog started to lift. Raghav was not just a soldier anymore. He was someone with a purpose, with people depending on him. And it made a difference. But even with all the progress, there were days when Raghav's inner battle resurfaced. One evening, a new veteran named Samir joined the group. Samir was in his early 30s, his eyes constantly darting around the room, as if expecting an ambush. He had served in Kashmir during an intense firefight where a whole platoon was wiped out in a surprise attack. Raghav could see the familiar signs of PTSD: fidgeting hands, quiet speech, and constant glances at the door. During the group meeting, Samir opened up, his voice breaking. "I was supposed to protect them, my men. I failed them. And now, every night, I hear their voices, calling out, asking me why I couldn't save them. I wish I had died instead of them." Raghav could feel the raw pain in Samir's words. He recognized that anguish. It was the same emptiness he had felt when his own men died. He felt the urge to say something, to reach out, but the words caught in his throat. He wanted to help, but the weight of his own guilt was too heavy. Later that night, as he and Asha sat in the kitchen, he said, "I feel like I'm not doing enough. I can't even help Samir." Asha reached over, taking his hand. "You're doing exactly what you can, Raghav. You've been through hell, and now you're showing others that they can make it out. You don't have to save everyone. You just have to be there for them the way you've been there for yourself." Raghav nodded, but the doubt lingered. The weight of his own experiences still felt like a burden. Would he ever truly heal? Or would the scars from the border always be a part of him? As the months passed, Arav continued to grow, and his bond with his father deepened. Raghav started showing up at his school events, something he hadn't done before. He cheered at sports day, proudly wearing a Papa's team badge that Arav had made for him. The little moments meant everything to Raghav. But then, one evening, things took a turn. It was a rainy night in Delhi, and Raghav had just returned from a meeting with government officials about military pensions. He seemed fine, but something was different. Asha couldn't place it, but the air felt heavy. She watched as he moved through the house in a daze, not engaging with her or Arav. It wasn't the typical quiet he had adopted in the past. It was a darker silence, like something inside him had snapped. Raghav retreated to the backyard again. Asha followed but stayed near the door, not wanting to push him. "I'm just tired," he said, his back to her. "I thought helping them would help me too." Asha hesitated before speaking. "It's okay to be tired, Raghav. You've been carrying so much for so long. You can't do it all at once." He turned around slowly, his eyes hollow. "What if I'm not strong enough, Asha? What if I can't handle it anymore?" The vulnerability in his voice broke her heart. She approached him, her arms open, ready to embrace him. "You don't have to carry it all. You have us. You have me. We'll go through this together, every step of the way." Raghav collapsed into her arms, his breath ragged. "I don't know if I can ever be the man I was." Asha kissed his forehead. "You're not the same man, Raghav, and that's okay. You don't have to go back to who you were. You just have to be who you are now." The next day, Raghav visited Samir. The younger man had been struggling, not coming to the meetings for several weeks. He had withdrawn completely, and Raghav feared he might be on the brink of a breakdown. Sitting in Samir's small apartment, Raghav said nothing at first. He simply sat there, a quiet presence, just as Samir had done for him. Finally, after what felt like hours, Samir spoke. "I don't know if I can live with this, Raghav. I don't know if I can ever forgive myself for what happened." Raghav leaned forward. "I know the feeling, but you don't have to forgive yourself all at once. You don't have to carry it alone either. Let the others help you. Let them carry some of that weight." Samir looked at him, his eyes wet. "You don't know what it's like. You don't know how hard it is to live with this." "I do," Raghav said quietly. "Ido. But you'll never get through it unless you let yourself. And you won't heal unless you stop running from it." It was the longest conversation Raghav had had in weeks, but it was also the most freeing. It wasn't just about saving others anymore. It was about saving himself. That night, Raghav sat on the porch watching the rain fall. He felt lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from his chest. He wasn't cured. Healing wasn't a destination, it was a journey. But at least he wasn't alone on it anymore. Asha came outside and joined him. She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Together, they looked out into the rain, a sense of peace between them that had been absent for so long. Months passed, and with each passing day, Raghav felt a little more like himself. The shadow of the border no longer clung to him as tightly as before. It was still there, lingering like an old wound, but it was no longer the first thing he saw when he woke up. Instead, he saw his son's face, his wife's smile, and the many soldiers who now looked up to him as a leader in the fight for their mental health. Operation Homefront was thriving. The foundation had expanded, offering counseling, workshops, and job placement for soldiers transitioning back into civilian life. More and more veterans reached out to Raghav, some of them broken, others filled with hope, all seeking the same thing: understanding. And Raghav realized that in helping others, he had finally begun to help himself. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Arav excitedly shared his day. "Papa, guess what? We won the inter-school cricket tournament today, and I hit the winning run." Raghav's face lit up with pride. He had always been a cricket fan, and watching Arav take the field with the same passion and joy that Raghav once had brought him a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He reached across the table and ruffled Arav's hair. "I'm so proud of you, son." Asha watched the exchange, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. For the first time in months, she saw Raghav fully present. His eyes weren't distant, and his smile wasn't forced as dinner continued. The conversation flowed easily. Raghav wasn't lost in his thoughts. He wasn't haunted by the sounds of gunfire or the memories of soldiers who never made it home. He was here with his family in this moment, and that, in itself, was a victory. Later that evening, Raghav stepped outside to take a walk. The air was crisp, and the stars shone brightly above. It had been years since he had taken a moment like this. Just to breathe, he walked slowly, reflecting on how far he had come. He thought about his men, the ones who had died, the ones who had made it back. He thought about Samir, who had started coming to meetings again, and how he had finally found some semblance of peace in the community they had built. He thought about Major Singh, who had gone back to his family after years of silence. The work they were doing was important, far more important than any medals or commendations. He stopped at the mango tree in the backyard, the place where it all began, the place where he had first broken down. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the memories wash over him. And then, for the first time, he didn't feel the weight of his past pulling him down. It was still there, but it wasn't all-consuming. It was a part of him, just as every battle scar, every memory, was. Asha joined him outside, her presence as steady and warm as ever. She slipped her hand into his, and for a long while, they simply stood there, watching the world around them. "You've come a long way," she said softly. "You're not the same man, Raghav, but I think that's exactly what we needed." He looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I'm sorry, Asha, for everything." She shook her head, smiling. "You don't have to apologize. You were lost, and now you're finding your way back. We're all finding our way." Back at the foundation, Raghav found new purpose in the work. They had secured funding for a mental health initiative that would provide free counseling to veterans and their families. His vision was growing. He was no longer just the man who came back from the border. He was a leader, a beacon of hope for those who had seen the worst of humanity and still found a way to move forward. And slowly, one day at a time, he became the man he thought he could never be again. He stood before a crowd of veterans one evening, giving a speech at an annual fundraiser for Operation Homefront. He had come a long way from the man who had returned home in shattered pieces. "I used to think," he began, his voice strong but soft, "that I was broken, that the things I saw, the things I did, had changed me forever. But I've learned that there is no shame in healing, and there is no shame in asking for help." The crowd was silent, hanging on to his every word. "When I came back from the border, I thought I was beyond saving," he continued. "But I'm here to tell you that no one is beyond saving. We all carry our scars. Some of them are visible, some of them aren't. But the important thing is that we're still here. And that means we have a chance to heal, to help each other, and to build something better." Raghav paused, looking out at the faces in the crowd. His brothers and sisters in arms. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He wasn't just a man haunted by his past anymore. He was someone who had turned that past into something meaningful. As he finished the speech, he looked out at Asha and Arav, standing by the door, their eyes filled with pride. The rain had stopped, and the night sky was clear. It was a new chapter for Raghav, one he could face with courage, knowing he wasn't alone. His past didn't define him, he defined who he was becoming. And as he stepped off the stage, he knew that the journey was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face whatever came next.